Today I've got the amazing Paul Lanfear joining me on the Real Talk podcast. Paul worked as a barrister for over 10 years in law firms in London, Leeds and New York after Paul moved into the world of property through the encouragement of his wife. We dived into the similarities of our childhoods and career aspirations and our joint love for Metallica. Paul shares his intentions with his recently formed breakfast networking event. It's a fantastic event which focuses on building connections and relationships. Excellent. Okay, welcome to the Real Talk podcast, Paul. Thanks for making the trip across from Leeds.
Sunny Leeds. Yeah.
Are you from Leeds originally?
No, I'm not. I was born in Torquay. Have you heard of Torquay?
I have.
Down in the West.
I love that place.
Yeah. So I was born in Torquay Hospital.
Yeah.
But all of my family are from like the north of England, so I kind of unconsciously migrated back over a period of time. So yeah, live in Yorkshire, live in Leeds, live in North Leeds.
In the dream.
And I absolutely love it. It's strange. Like I have never felt more content and more at home than where I am now. And even though it's not the place I was born, I think sometimes you just gravitate to a place, don't you? I think it helps that happily married and have a beautiful family and live in a beautiful house. So that probably helps as well.
Yeah. Nice. So tell us about what you do, mate, and what is it that your profession, your background, how have you got where you are today? And
so like a lot of stuff has been plan B. So I'll tell you plan A.
Yeah.
Okay. So plan A was to be the guitarist in Metallica.
Yeah, I'm a Metallica fan as well.
Oh, I'm absolutely obsessed with them. I've seen them so many times. I've seen them in all kinds of different places. So the plan A was to basically assist James Hetfield with his guitar work.
Yeah.
But a complete absence of any musical ability brought that to a conclusion.
All right, mate.
So I had to think about like plan B, with basically plan B, and everything since then has been plan B. But it's been a pretty good plan B. Mm-hmm. So So I suppose, like, what would I put on my LinkedIn profile? My LinkedIn profile would say, Paul Lanfear got a first-class honours degree in law. He then went on to qualify at two of the world's most prestigious law firms. That's definitely true. Practiced in London, Leeds, New York, Asia. Had a very, very rewarding and challenging legal career.
Criminal law, I assume.
Well, no. So I started off I got a really unique opportunity. I started off in a division of what became an American law firm, and I was given a role in what was called the investigations unit. Mm-hmm. So my first job was working in the biggest fraud investigation unit in the City of London, and we acted for companies' directors who had allegedly breached their duties and companies who had lost money, had suffered embezzlement, and we would help them recover their funds. So I had a very niche specialty for most of my practice, which was freezing people's assets and then chasing those assets around the world. And like I absolutely loved it. Like really intense, very long hours, but definitely not boring, like really, really exciting. So, I represent, these numbers don't sound like anything nowadays because everything has moved on, but I used to chase down millions and millions and millions across the globe. Now, like, you'd need to be, with inflation, that would be like 100 million. I think the biggest case I ever was involved in would probably be, if it was run today, it'd be worth $1 billion, I reckon. Bear in mind, I played a very small part in a very big machine with just surrounded by geniuses, rocket scientists, experts, and I was just...
So you don't just run a breakfast club in Leeds then? There's a bit more to you.
I do now. I do now. But that all came out of being completely failing at school. So I was obsessed by Metallica and obsessed by music, that I really wanted to be the path. And my parents were teachers, and I really my mum's from Sheffield, my dad's from in the northeast. He was brought up in what he says was a slum, so I'm not being negative about the northeast. At the time, the place where he lived was very run down, had rats running through his bedroom, My mum, her dad worked in the steel mills of Sheffield. Day he retired, day he died, which is like pretty typical. That at the time, a lot of industrial disease and all the rest of it. He complained about having a perpetual headache, and listening to that now, you're like, Mum, he obviously was suffering with some sort of problem. Anyway, so my mum sort of persuaded me that she loved the rock band idea, and she said, Paul, I love the rock band. She didn't really like the rock band. So I love the rock band idea, Paul, love it, but why don't you continue with your education just like one more step? Because they were teachers, and I think that's their world. So I did, and I got I wanted to study politics, but there was this random timetable clash that means I couldn't study politics, so I ended up studying law by accident. And just had like the most amazing guy teach us. And I've had that blessing like all the way through my life, is that at every turn a teacher has turned up, a mentor has turned up, like a guide has turned up. And you hear, like, I have to say particularly blokes like give this impression that they were born a genius and they did it all themselves, and like that definitely isn't me. Like, I've stood on the shoulders of giants since the day I was born, whether it's like learning to play the guitar or all the stuff I do now. So absolutely love law. But then by the time I got to university to study law, I had like the kind of wake up, because one of the first guys I met at university, called Eddie, he was really cool and he was a really nice guy, and he was trying to help me, but he sat me down and had the chat. He said, Paul, your parents are teachers, right? So you're broke. You're dyslexic, so you didn't pass your English exam. You did really badly in school, and then you're showing up at university and you're expecting to become a barrister. You want to give up now, mate? You want to give up now? You're wasting your time. And he was coming from a place of trying to rescue this person he thought was about to detonate their life, I think. And are we allowed to swear on the podcast?
Yeah, go for it.
And I thought, fuck you. Like, fuck you, Eddie. And he's my buddy, and I still would love to see him. But I just thought, there's no way I'm taking that. So I just kind of became absolutely obsessed about developing this path. And then worked my arse off, nearly killed myself working my arse off, Got my first. Getting a first in law gets you a long way in the law. Like, it opens quite a lot of doors. I was so broke, I had to be sponsored by a charity to be able to get through the whole education, because it's really expensive to get a legal education. Got back in touch with them. I said, look, I've done really well, but I haven't got a job. They introduced me to some people who took a chance on me. They gave me my first job in the city, and kind of the rest is history, and just worked really hard, for a decade, and until the kind of the property. So then there was later a transition at property, but yeah, I had a great innings as a lawyer. I enjoyed it a lot of the time, not all the time. Worked with some great clients, did some good cases. The law isn't really about kind of justice. I think people like naively think it is. It's mostly about finding answers to questions. But, I think I probably got justice in a couple of cases as well. Like, I helped some people out of some dark places who didn't deserve to be in that dark place. The state from time to time has bad actors within it, even if the state is not the bad actor, but the person in the prosecuting authority might be incompetent or might be corrupt. And I certainly have resolved some of those issues for people.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm pleased. I'm pleased with that part of my work. Yeah.
Mate, there's so many parallels between my growing up and your growing up. How old are you?
I am 1976, so what's that mean?
Same as me.
48.
Oh, it's weird. This is getting weird.
Yeah.
So I was obsessed with Metallica when I was younger as well.
Well,
I'm from Sheffield.
Ah, there you go.
And I used to get one of my first jobs when I left school was a cleaner at Sheffield Arena. And my first shift working at the arena, Metallica were actually playing that night.
No way.
I got to go backstage with them. Yeah, I was obsessed with them as well.
God.
Yeah, so I've seen them. I've seen Metallica about 10 times as well.
Yeah.
So Monsters of Rock which was the best gig I saw them at. I think it was 94-ish, somewhere around that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was when I was banging to Metallica. It was James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Kirk Hammett.
Yeah.
And who am I missing? I forget the missing one.
Was it the early bass player?
Yeah, it's when
The guy with
one.
the shaved hair.
Yeah.
So
it's when one was my best track ever of all time.
Yeah.
Off the, I think the album was called One as well, wasn't it?
I have no idea. Mine's Seek
White
and
One.
Destroy, which is off, I think,
Well, that's the
Kill 'Em
old
All.
school, 87, Seek and Destroy.
Yeah, I think that's my favourite as well.
That's
and I
off the
recently
Ride the Lightning album.
got into like the Viper's Nest. I don't know if you see the way they do the gigs now.
That's the new stuff, isn't it? I'm not into it.
No, they have this like triangle that you can get into, which is in the stage.
All right.
At their gigs.
Yeah.
So I recently was allowed into the Viper's
you?
Nest, and absolutely mental.
Yeah.
Anyway,
When Load came out, the Load album, that's when I fell out with Metallica. Like they changed he cut his hair, didn't he? That's what it was.
I think you should allow yourself to fall back in love.
Yeah? I'll give it another shot.
Yeah. And like I've fairly recently go back and listen to the albums in order, like in the gym, and that kind of reconnects me to it.
Yeah, Kill 'Em All was the first one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Then Ride the Lightning.
Yeah.
Paris has got no idea what we're talking about.
But she has got a Metallica haircut, which I really like.
But she does not know who Michael Barrymore is. Can you believe that?
That cannot be true.
That's true. Yeah, honestly.
Well,
she's coming on the podcast. I can't wait to list out all these people if she don't know. Yeah, and also when I was at school, when I was studying my GCSEs, I did quite well at GCSEs. Well, I say I did; they were all estimated grades because I never sat any exams. But I got enough to get me into college, and my career goal path was criminal lawyer. I was obsessed with studying, law and Law and Order and The Bill. That was my favourite show on the telly. And I loved all things to do with law. My dad was pushing me in that direction as well, who was also a steel worker at British Steel in Sheffield. So our parents probably know each other, which is even weirder.
Yeah, that's probably true, actually.
Yeah, he was there his whole life, my dad, from being 16 to when he retired. He was 50 odd when he retired.
But you instead went into the army, didn't you?
Yeah. Which is... so I did the A levels. I sat my A levels. I had no interest in the topic, but they were a requirement for me to go do my law degree. So I had to have 3 A levels as a minimum.
Yeah.
So the A levels I chose were I sort of had an interest in them. So I chose computer studies, human biology, and PE, and those 3 allowed me to progress into a degree. But you leave school. I was 17 years old. Dropped into university, you start to find into college.
Yeah.
Girls come on the scene, booze comes on the scene, college becomes 3rd on the list.
Yeah. Drug, sex and rock and roll.
Yeah, that's it. And my studies, I wasn't very good at it. And I was like, fuck this. I don't want to be in education any longer. And then you look at that law degree, and at the time, from memory, it was 7 years for the degree. And I thought, there's no way I'm being 26 before I've got a job. So I decided to become a car mechanic. And so I left them A levels, went to become a car mechanic, sat on the old YTS scheme, 35 quid a week, sweeping up car floors and getting shitted up every day. And within 7 months of that apprenticeship, car mechanic's apprenticeship, I had 14 points on my driving licence because they kept lending me fast cars and saying, go and try this, go and try this. I just passed my test. First car I test drove for that company was a Clio Williams. 17-year-old lad. Who fucking does that? What am I going to do with that? I'm going to tear the arse off it. And I got stopped, of course. Then I got stopped in an Alfa Romeo. Then I got stopped in in my mum's Mini Metro.
Okay.
And then the last one was a Lotus 7.
Right. Oh, wow.
Who gives cars like that to... Right by Sheffield Parkway as well.
Yeah. Seems like a really bad idea.
Yeah, it was a bad idea. So I got all these points on my licence. But 4 speeding tickets back then was 12 points. You used to get 3 points a ticket, and that's how it used to work. But my last speeding ticket that I got, my 4th one, I thought, I'm going to get banned now. I don't know if I've told this story before on the podcast. I hope I haven't. I'm going to get banned. So this copper that pulled me over, I was in the Lotus 7. He gets me in the back of the police car and he said, right, what's your name? And I thought, I'm going to get banned, I'm going to lose my job. Fuck, what do I do? I went, my name's Simon Topper. And he went, what? Simon Topper. And I went, yeah. And he went, what's your address? 1 Smith Street. And he's writing these details down. And he goes, you got a licence on you? I said, no. Right, well, here's your producer. And I'm there 17 thinking, yes, I've fucking got away with this. In a registered car for the company. I drives back to the yard, and my mentor, as I was the apprentice, my guy that was taking me through my apprenticeship,
Yeah.
a guy called Ian Lound, he's dead now, and he said to me, "Where you been? You been ages. You're supposed to go to Sheffield and back." It's like, done for speeding, but I've got away with it because I gave him a fake name. And he went, "You fucking done what?" I said, "I gave him a fake name." He goes, "Paul, they're going to catch you." I was like, "How are they going to catch me? They ain't got my name, they ain't got my licence, they don't know who I am." I said, "But the car's registered here. You signed out the car. Like, you're going to have to go and own up." I was like, "I'm not owning up, no chance." Anyway, he frog marched me down to the police station. And I got to the police station, and he said, "Look, this is my apprentice. He's only 17. He's just gave you a fake name after getting a speeding ticket." And they locked me up in a cell. And I thought, "Oh shit!"
Yeah,
like
yeah.
what they did it to like.
Yeah,
so I
sure,
didn't do it again.
Yeah.
And they let me out about 2 hours later and said, "You know, we're going to rewrite you a new ticket. And you can go to court to plead." Exceptional hardship was the plea.
Because it interferes with your role.
Yeah. So they gave me 5 points in court and a £250 fine and a community service order. So I'd got 14 points, so the company could insure me, but I couldn't get insurance on my own car, which was a bit shit. So I had to get the bus to work and all that. And then I started seeing this lass called Claire, and she was joining the army.
Okay.
And I thought, yeah, fuck it, I'll do that. So, like, I had no plan to join the army at all. I don't come from a family of soldiers or anything like that. And I went down to the careers office, and she was joining the Royal Signals, Claire was. I went down to the careers office and I said, he said, what do you do now? And I said, "I'm a car mechanic." And he said, "So you want to be joining the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, the REME?" So I start filling this form in, and he goes to me, "You need to now sit an intelligence test." So I said, yeah, no problem. So I sit this test. You failed. I was like, "Oh, fucking hell." "What do you mean I failed?" He said, yeah, you failed. So you can either join the Royal Engineers or you can join the infantry. Okay. And I didn't know I didn't know the difference.
Yeah.
So what's the difference? And he said, "Well, if you join the Royal Engineers, you can carry on with your trade as a car mechanic, or you can join the infantry and just catch bullets." And I was like, "Hey, I'll join the Royal Engineers."
I'd say he didn't really pitch that very well, did
No,
he?
he didn't know. He didn't know.
Like...
So I signs up for the Royal Engineers, and he sits me down, and we're chatting away, and he says, "Right, well, now you've accepted into the engineers, you've got to now pick a trade." And this is how I ended up in the construction industry. So you pick a trade from X, Y, and Z. He said, "What we'll recommend is, as you've already been doing car mechanics, you can join as a fitter," which is what they call a car mechanic in the engineers, working on Land Rovers and things like that. I said, "Oh, let's carry on with that then."
Yeah.
"Right, you've got to sit another intelligence test." Oh, so I failed that, and I was like, "Oh, fucking hell." I said, "Can I still join the Royal Engineers?" He said, "Yeah, but with that pass mark, you can either be a bricklayer or a joiner."
Okay.
I said, "What about electrician?" He went, "No, you failed." I was like, "Oh, fucking hell." So I'm not smart enough to be a sparky or a mechanic, but I can lay bricks. Yeah, that's fine. So they allowed me to join as a bricklayer, which is how I ended up in the industry like this. Then I turned up at my unit where Claire was as well, and on the first night I gone to the women's lines to find her, and I got caught straight in jail. On my first day in the army, I got put in jail for being in the women's lines.
That's not really the start we're looking for, is it?
It's not, is it? Yeah. And to say that I wanted to be a lawyer, like, I've had quite a checkered late path in my late teens. Yeah.
But you found the path, didn't you?
Yeah, eventually, yeah. I did 14 years in the military, in the engineers, and then I left to become a corporate construction manager, and here we are today as that career's progressed from being a corporate manager into my own business, into teaching others to do the same.
And thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you for thanking me. I don't think there's anyone's...
I think I don't know whether you've noticed, but like we have this negative narrative going around about the UK, the world,
everyone moans,
of it.
Don't they?
And it's like, what do people want? I appreciate things are difficult. I'm not making any challenges, and there's lots of really bad stuff going on around. But it's like a question of like counting your blessings. Like, thanks to you and everybody who has contributed in that way. Like, we, let's be honest, do live these blessed lives. We live in a relatively safe country where you can pretty much more or less say what you like, and you can go about your business, and you can have a private life, and that's thanks to people who've kind of put themselves in harm's way in all kinds of different capacities, so we have those freedoms. You know, I think we all have these like personal little, I have these personal things that sense check me. So if I'm feeling like a bit miserable about a refurb going over, I remember that my granddad was in the Second World War and he came back thoroughly traumatised, as they all did. And I think, Paul, just get a hold of yourself, mate. Just get a hold of yourself. Like, you've never had to do what your granddad had to do. So like, just let's snap back into the real world.
Yeah.
And you know, it is thanks to people like you who have like been of service that we do get to live in this fabulous country and do what we want, and we can watch our kids grow up in freedom and choices and all the rest of it. I'm just a bit tired of like the narrative that everything is awful and all the rest of it. I know there are problems, I'm not being naive, but I also have to think we have to count our blessings. I feel like so blessed that we have the choices that we have now.
We get to choose what we
definitely
recognise in the world, right?
Yeah, we have a lot of people. I think are freer than they realise as well. You know, I think people can be freer than they realise. They can think what they like, they can say what they like, they can do what they like within, you know,
within reason. Yeah. I mean, I think the UK is actually probably one of the most diverse nations, and I've been all over the world. One of the most diverse nations I've ever like been a part of, and I don't mean that just solely culturally. I mean, we have everything on this island. You know, you name it in the UK, and we've got all weathers. We've got all terrains. We've got flat mountains. We've got snow. We've got, like, there are countries in the world that have never experienced that. I remember I did some adventure training in the forces in Jamaica, and we hiked up Blue Mountain and refurbished a school while we were up there. And in Jamaica, on the mountain, people actually live on the mountain, like full time in shacks, huts. Never seen a white person before in their life. And you know, you come along and they look at you like you're a new creation. Quite a, well, I say it was a humbling experience. Yeah, it was. And when we got to this school on the top of, it was about halfway up the mountain, we got to this school that we were working on, and the kids they'd never ever seen a white man before, ever. And for us to turn up, you know, they didn't have power, tellies, and they were so. Well, I say grateful. I think it was gratitude. They were so grateful that we'd come over from the UK on an exchange piece to come and work on their school for them. And like Jamaicans, in the part that we were at, all they knew was sweating, like sun 365 days a year. Like they'd never experienced rain, snow, wind, flat lands, like clean water, electricity. Like the UK has everything. In addition to all of those different diverse cultures and everything that we do have in this country, which absolutely fascinate me now in my later life. So when I was in the forces, just to give that some more context, in the forces I was in the Royal Engineers, where they only allowed men in for a start. So there was not even any females. There were very, very, very few people of a different nationality. And there's certainly the gays were forbidden, lesbians were forbidden, any other gender was all forbidden. And then when I left this, now remember I went here from school, from being a Yorkshireman and from a lad that's been raised by a steel working class family. So my civilian sort of upbringing was also the same. It was very much like that. Like I didn't know any gay people. I didn't know any. You know, I only knew white people in my school and everything. We never had any foreigners in my school at all. Then in the forces, so now I'm like, I leave the forces at 32. I left the army, 33. I left the army, went into construction industry, which is also a very sexist, close-minded, like insular. You've got to be a middle-aged, balding white male to succeed in this industry. There was no female leaders in any of the organisations I worked for. And then since leaving that corporate space and coming into, we'll call it this public space, if you like, working in property and going to networking events and speaking at events and on stages and things like that, like what I was immediately exposed to with that is how much diversity there really is on earth. Different cultures, different genders, different sexualities, that's broadened my mind and thinking in my mid-40s to a degree that sometimes I have to go, what the fucking hell, this is like mental. It's like, and I get that some people aren't comfortable with this topic, but fuck it, we'll talk about it anyway if you're all right with it. I spoke at a LGBTQIA event in Bolton earlier this year, March, April time this year, and I didn't know that this was the context of the event. I just went to speak at it, and when I arrived, I've never been further beyond my comfort zone than I was that day. Right. I walked into this Bolton Wanderers stadium, the football club, and as I walked in, there was rows of exhibitors at this conference, and the first stall was vegan condoms. And I thought, why are people eating condoms anyway? Like, why would someone buy a vegan condom?
I don't think they're eating them.
No, neither do I. but that was my thought process. And then the next one was dildos, and I thought, am I in the right place here? Then the next one was like, it was then sex toys, and then it was...
Can I just say, like, on my podcast bingo, I didn't have any of these words down for this podcast.
Did you not? So it was quite a... Like, I was so shy and nervous because that was my first thing I saw at this event, and it was a long corridor, like, with these stalls either side, of all things such as that. Yeah. And at the end of this, like, corridor, I saw a tent, and it had a word above this tent, and it said, "Send Story." And it was in like a kid's written font and a little teepee. And I thought, that looks normal. I'm just going to fucking ignore all what's going on in my peripherals here. And I'm just going to head for that comfortable place. So I was like, I had got my military march on. And I started really like motoring towards this tent. And I got to this tent, and it was a neurodivergence tent. And the lady that ran it, a lady called Jo, she was all about... in your marketing, putting in an inclusive message, how you can bring in neurodivergence and build it into your products and services, and blah blah blah. And she took one look at me, and she said, I bet we were speaking for less than 30 seconds, and she said, I bet you all your customers are all either from the construction industry, in property, mid-40s, white males, and shaved head. And I had to take a moment and go, you've literally just described every customer I ever work with. And she goes, why do you think that is? I said, I don't know, I guess like attracts like. And she said, no, your messaging, you will be talking about you in your messaging, and you're not like opening up to this wider world. Anyway, I had a bit of a back and two. And she taught me so much that day about being inclusive. I went from there onto the stage to speak to what I've now learned is a neurodivergent, lesbian, what is LGBT? Lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer, I think that's it, LGBTQ, audience. And I'm on the stage, and I got fucking, like, internally, I had immediate stage fright, like, what the fuck am I going to say to these people about construction? Because that's what my talk was about, that I'd been rehearsing for weeks. And I'm thinking, like, these aren't in property, they're not builders, what am I going to say? And I thought, I'm just going to plough on anyway. And what I quickly realised within 10 seconds was there's still, this audience, despite their gender and their neurodivergence, they're still people. And these people still have building work done. They still can invest in property. But you kind of I do anyway, you kind of get given this is the person, and you pigeonhole that person into some sort of industry or things around that person's identity that's so not true. I don't know why I've gone on this tangent, but we're talking about divergence in this diversity in this country. I think we have everything.
And if you're not all right talking about this, obviously we won't talk about this.
Yeah.
But I saw recently you had like a big anniversary of sobriety. So
6 years.
6 years, so presumably in that period of time, you have had, and this is my impression of you, I appreciate we don't know each other very well, you've had that epiphany, you've had that spiritual awakening, which is, I think, was it Carl Jung talks about it, that in order for people to heal themselves, there's a whole category of people who need to have the spiritual awakening in order to come through the other side. And for you to be 6 years sober, you have to have had that spiritual awakening. So I am not surprised to hear you be receptive to human beings, because I think, when anybody has, I've definitely had a spiritual awakening. I lost a really good friend, a few years ago. It was one of the worst things I've ever happened in my life. Like, it just hit me like a train. And I would say one of the outcomes of that is that I had, through a different maybe vehicle than you did, that spiritual awakening of suddenly seeing the world differently. It's like, firstly, it's that, there used to be that image you used to see of like two faces and a candlestick. I don't even remember that. After that, like, everything has seemed differently. I feel human beings I see human beings very, very differently, and I don't want to like take us like into complete hippie nonsense, but I think even it's difficult with all human beings. Okay, I have a line because I'm only a beginner in this world, but for most human beings, even if they've really pissed me off, I do try and look at them and think, this is somebody who is struggling. Like, nobody would behave badly towards me who was in a good space, who was happy, who was joyful, who was content. Someone would only behave badly or rudely to me if they are themselves struggling with something. And every single human being I know is struggling with something, and particularly the ones who look like they most have their shit together, because you go out for a walk with them, you look into the sunset and they just drop the bomb, like, oh mate, like, my dad's in hospital this week, and I'm really worried about him, and I'm really stressed, and I'm really I don't know what's going to happen next. It's like, wow, this is a person who looks like and does have their shit together, but every human being is dealing with something. So circling back to that comment, I'm not surprised that you went into that new environment and were able to go into it with like an open heart, because I think for the journey that you've been on, you've obviously had to have an awakening and an opening of your heart to human beings in order to fill the hole, heal the hole,
Yeah, it's I think becoming aware of that change as well is a really not difficult thing to do, but you've got to become aware that you're aware. Does that make sense? Like, recognizing that I didn't put those two things together till you've just said it, in truth. Like, change is always happening, right? And the more we can, I think the phrase you use is open your heart to things. Like, the more things can come in, the more, like, when you open your heart, expand your mind, like, the world almost becomes bigger, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And what I noticed as well is that I am like really repelled by things as well. So like, there are places, people and things that just do not float my boat anymore. And maybe like 10 years ago they did. I'll walk into a room and it'll be like, nah, this is not for me. Like, I'm not feeling this one little bit. And I've noticed I've become a lot more receptive to that kind of thing. Like, I really lean into my intuition, because I think I can make different choices now. Like, life has progressed well. So I feel like I know that I can make different choices. So I am sensitive, there's people you just get a really good feeling about, and you think, this is worth doubling down. And at people at like different stages as well, you think, this is somebody I'm going to back. Like, I'm going to try and nurture and work with this person for as long as I can. And there's people who can offer you all kinds of vast opportunities, and you think, there is no way in hell I'm not even going to turn up.
What a great point that is. Like, we met at a breakfast.
I have that about
in
Paris.
Leeds.
Paris is great.
Yeah.
She's got such a good spirit, and and energy. You're very fortunate to have her, and no doubt you reward her really well and look after her.
Yeah.
But she's doing great work, isn't she?
Yeah, she is. Yeah. Like we met at a breakfast in Leeds. It was this year.
Yes, it was.
And that was the first time we met, and I felt exactly what you've just described. Like, I need to work with Paul. Let's get him speaking at the event at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And how can we, support and promote this event that he's created? I have to hand on heart say that event that you created in Leeds that I attended has been, as I look across all of the other events that I regularly go to, the best, hands down. And a couple of reasons I'd share with you, if you like, if you want.
Please do. Very well. Obviously, I'm very flattered, and I'm also intrigued as to know why.
Why? Well, it's different. Like, how many networking events? They're at 7 p.m. at night. You turn up. They're in a shitty hotel, in the cheapest room that the hotel will put on. They put on a fucking wanky speaker.
Yeah.
That's got their shitty PowerPoint slides, and they tell a story about their journey for the next 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's just the same old.
Yeah.
And when did networking events start becoming about a 20-minute presentation about the speaker? Like, when did that happen? Now, what you've created is a true networking event. Networking events for me are about going and networking with other people and coming together to meet other people, to collaborate, to do business together, to sell to one another, to buy from one another, to support others' businesses. That's how we grow, right?
Definitely.
Now, and what you created there was no speaker. We sat down, had breakfast, table of 10, I think it was.
Yeah.
So there was many tables of 10, maybe 6 or 7, I can't remember. Breakfast together, conversations are flowing. There's no, right, stop, the speaker's coming on, none of that.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget this, you actually stood up and encouraged people to pitch to the other 9 people sat at their table. That was fucking, like, I've never seen anybody do that at a networking event. And what I loved about it was, look, we are here to grow together. The only way you're going to do that is by telling people what you do, sharing your service, sharing your product, and encouraging the other 9 people sat at your table to do some business with you.
Definitely.
And I loved that. I think, I'm thinking of a couple of networking events now. In fact, I had one yesterday. Do you want to come to this networking event? It's a strictly no pitch, no selling event. I genuinely understand where that person's coming from in their heart.
Yeah, I do.
I don't want you to think you're going to come and get sold to.
Yeah.
But I think that demonises sales when we do things like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a good place to come from.
Definitely not. I mean, people are working so hard, to make a living for themselves and to support themselves, their family, their communities. Like, people just are grafting so hard.
Yeah.
Whether it's their business or they're participating in somebody else's enterprise and it's kind of their job to go out and get the sales. Like, everybody deserves a break, I think.
Yeah.
And I think I definitely understand people's reluctance around sales, where there's just like a vomit-inducing pitch at the end from the person at the front, and particularly when it's not even delivered with conviction. It's like, this is, and it goes on for too long. Like, I've been in those rooms, and if they're running over now, I'll probably walk out, because I do think events should start and finish on time. I just have a bit of a pet hate about that.
Yeah.
But I think, if you're the mission with the breakfast is, I have a whole ecosystem of businesses and enterprises, and they all interrelate to each other, and I love it. The breakfast is kind of like the gift. So it's just like totally turning up on purpose, turning up on the mission, and everybody, like, I sometimes say at the beginning, I don't know whether I said at your one, you're either going to have a great time or I'm going to be dead by the end of the day. So we've got 2 hours, people.
Yeah.
And just try and create the most welcoming, nurturing, friendly, positive environment, and to try and push people across that line to really tell people what they want. Because I think that most people turn up to networking events, they're so scared that they talk to a couple of people they already know, and they don't really ask what they want for, and that just seems like lunacy to me.
Yeah, me
so
too.
as you'll see, I push people across the line in a supportive and friendly way, and I think it actually works. So I'm an ambivert, so I'm sort of halfway between an extrovert and an introvert. I love solitude, I love surfing on my own, I love being in nature on my own, but then again, I do like a really good blast occasionally with good people. So I'm kind of in that mid zone. And part of the structure of the way my breakfast works is it's empowering to introverts as well. Because extroverts can more or less look after themselves because they like being around people. But introverts, my experience is they welcome structure and like being put in the space to do the work, because they can't like hang around in the toilet, you know, like being freaked out because there's all these people. So it's designed to make everybody feel comfortable. And I've always said, if people don't like it, they can have their money back, and I would do that. I always say that. I say, if you don't get to the end, you're not willing to give it 10 out of 10, just come over, give you your money back there and then. It's not about the money. It's not about the money.
Yeah,
but I'm pleased you loved it.
Yeah, I did. It was great.
And I spoke to some people afterwards. They're very complimentary about you, and I appreciate it. And there's been a bit of business done off the back of it as well, which is good. So everybody wins.
Yeah, we've got Louise is exhibiting at the conference at the end of the year.
The lover of colour, the absolutely fabulous Louise.
Yeah,
please check.
Zoe's coming along as well to the conference. She's great, isn't she?
They are both absolute superstars. Like, shout out to both of them. Yeah, I mean, Zoe's actually the sponsor of the breakfast. I've known Zoe for a long time.
Have you?
Have you had her on the podcast yet?
No, she did a live training to my mastermind a few weeks ago.
Obviously,
got a couple of clients out the back of that.
You should both get Louise and Zoe on the podcast. So Zoe is the sponsor of the breakfast, and for this year, for a very specific reason that, she's got a great story, and the work she does is like genuinely life-changing because she protects people's assets. And that's certainly something that I've learned on the journey, is that part of growing your wealth is obviously good strong cash flow base, hopefully accumulate some capital as you go along, invest it wisely, but then the tier above is then to protect everything you've already got, because so many people in this industry just blow it. They get really over their skis, and we see it like every week. Someone tells me about someone else going bust, to the point now that it just washes over me. It's like, oh, right, and there's another. And then obviously at the top of the apex, I think, there's a whole idea that at some point in our lives, at an appropriate juncture, we make a contribution. And I think, interestingly, people try and do that, I think, too early on. Like, they haven't really sorted their cash flow out when they're trying to save the world. It's like, well, let's start with the fundamentals. But where Zoe fits into that is she's really good at the protection layer, making sure that, God forbid the worst was to happen, your family have, like, I would say a minimum of a year where they have no financial worries, where they can just pick up the pieces, that they can have a period of grieving. Particularly I think, like, within your audience, like men and women who are on the tools, who are, it's one of the highest industries for accidents at work. We have to think about, what would happen if the worst happens. So definitely look in that direction. I mean, I was speaking to him. I've surfed with a really lovely guy called Rich, and he's a joiner, and he got a hernia and he was off work for a few weeks. And I was like, "Oh, you'll be all right. You've got insurance, haven't you? You've got it all sorted." And he said, "No way. I'm just like every week I'm chipping into my savings." It's like, Rich, mate, that's not the plan, man.
Yeah.
We need to get this ship in order, mate.
Yeah.
So I pointed him in Zoe's direction. Whether he followed through, we'll see.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk some property stuff?
Yeah, go for it.
I don't. So I feel like we should do 2 minutes on property.
Yeah.
Just for your audience.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for us, but. So I got the property bug from my wife Liz. So we built the empire up from nothing, with just a lot of graft, a lot of risk, and I bumped into the lovely Liz Lanfear, who became Liz Lanfear, in the queue of a nightclub, tapped on the shoulder, and because my friend had asked me to, I have to say, and said, is it worth us coming in? And I meant, is this nightclub any good? And she just looked at me like that and went, no, mate. Anyway, a year later we're married and have a child. But she was definitely the property one, and I was a bit of a reluctant student of it, but we really dropped the hammer. And I think probably property now is not, if I'm honest, worth dabbling in. I think it's so hard now that I think you've either got to drop the hammer, commit to it, and really go for it, or I think there's other things that are worth doing. And I'm not necessarily even talking about necessarily property investment per se. I actually think trading businesses, most people should have have a trading business and then invest any profits they make into property or other assets to protect them in the future.
Could not agree more.
Trading businesses with limited debt that you love, the lifestyle, you employ some nice people, you have fun doing it. That to me is the future. I say that having learned the hard way, so we did, very aggressive growth. So we did, refinancing everything to the hilt. Then we brought on external investment, so we raised enormous amounts of private finance. Probably the reason we were able to grow is that we were just really good at that. And that's a lot to do with our values and who we are. People knew they would get their money back. Liz and I had the chat in the kitchen and we said, if we're going to borrow this money off these people, they're going to get it back, or we're going to sell this house, we're going to sell everything we own until these people are put whole. And obviously it went well. Lots of joint ventures, lots of collaborations. Some have gone well, some have gone less well. Learned a lot about collaborations. Happy to talk about that as well. Was overly eager to scale, so we've then chucked in things like rent to rent and purchase lease options and stuff like that. Then we put in a management company on the top of it. So at the end we had 236 tenants, which I don't recommend to anybody. we have far less tenants than that, but we've never been in a better position than we are now. So we rode that whole big kind of roller coaster, go big and then kind of come to your senses and then refocus. And now is much more focused on, my breakfast, my podcast, my inner circle mentoring group. I work with a maximum of 2 handfuls of people in a year, and then spend the rest of the time off on adventures, going to the Arctic, going to Morocco, going to Iceland next.
Yeah,
that's the next one.
We were supposed to go to Iceland in August and my flights got cancelled. It was good.
I wonder why they were cancelled.
It was
because it's a very dynamic place.
Yeah,
they had recently had a glacier collapse.
A lack of. It was when the glacier collapsed. That's what we thought. That was the reason. They didn't sell enough tickets for the flight.
Yeah.
It was a Friday. We was going out EasyJet from Luton.
It's a really we've never. Well, I have been for 2 hours on a crossover at Reykjavik on the way to Canada, but
this is getting weird now. I've done the exact same thing.
Well, I've not done the real thing. So we're going by sea. So we're going to take our own camper van and we're going to go via obviously over to the Hook of Holland, up to the top of Denmark, across the Faroe Islands, then the Faroe Islands to Iceland. Then we're going to circumnavigate it in our camper van. But it's a very, the more I read about it, so the plan with the adventures is that my daughter always decides. She says, let's go. Like you say, a few years ago, she was like, I want to go to the Arctic. Yeah. So we went to the Arctic. She serves up the plan.
Yeah.
And then I'll devise the plan. But
Love it. How old is she?
So she's 17 now. So obviously we're on the countdown to I don't want to come anymore, Dad.
Yeah.
But she wants to go to Iceland, so we're going to circumnavigate Iceland.
We watched, much to my detriment, when my little girl she would have been about 5 or 6. She watched a film on Netflix called Yes Day. Have you seen it?
No.
So this film it's about a parent that allows the kid anything they want for 24 hours. And the parent has to say yes to everything. There's a couple of rules around it. It was, you can't ask for anything that's living, so you can't get a new pet or a new plant or something like that. And none of it involved spending significant amounts of money, and you have to put a cap on it.
Yeah, that's smart. So
it was a Saturday, and it was, right, today is Yes Day, and your cap is 50 quid. And my daughter, first time we did it, she went like this. Ooh, where do we start? I don't even need your 50 quid. Oh, I had to get my toes painted, my fingernails painted, makeup. I think she even cut my hair, if I remember right. She loved it. Absolutely loved it. She gets one a year now. One Yes Day a year.
I love that. I love that. And that is kind of the beauty as well of the life you can create, through entrepreneurship and everything, is that you can say yes to all kinds of frankly bonkers stuff at times.
Yeah. Are you a yes man?
Yeah, I am definitely, in the sense that that is one of the privileges that I have in the life that I have designed, is that we can do all kinds of things, and I have this concept of being radically open-minded. I think particularly post-COVID, I think if COVID didn't wake people up to realise that we need to really get after it, then nothing ever will. And I'm just radically open-minded. But that can be, to big adventures like, Millie a few years ago said I want to go to the Arctic. So I decided I want to go surfing in the Arctic, because that's obviously what you do. But even like smaller things, when she gets in from college and, she said, can we go and do this? Like, I would say 99.99% of the time the answer is yes. And you learn like so much as well. I think like on the fatherhood piece, we don't ever really sit down and look across a table and have conversations in that way. It's always, our conversations are facilitated by going and doing stuff, going paddleboarding, setting fire to things in the woods, that kind of thing. Because it's that indirect thing of you're not kind of like staring each other down. I think certainly my experience of fatherhood is I've learned a lot more about her, and she's been able to ask me more difficult questions when it's not been that kind of confronting, looking across the desk thing. It's been, can we go and do this thing? And then when we're in the middle of doing the thing, it's like, Dad, can I ask you about this thing? It's like, yeah, of course you can ask me about that thing. And she asked me about something maybe which is a bit difficult and a bit confronting as a dad to have to address. But environment makes a big difference. So yes, I am a yes man in that respect.
Are your daughter inquisitive?
Yeah, very inquisitive. Yeah, very smart. But also, I think you also have to be well versed in this world in saying no. Like I say no to, not in that context, but in the context of like a lot of things. Saying no, I'm very protective of my time, and I'm very focused on the mission. Whatever the mission is right now.
Yeah.
Try not to get too sidetracked. And people are really good, I've noticed. So for example, I get invitations to speak. Often in January, people line up their speakers for the year, and can you do April? And I was like, the first date I can do is October, and you kind of expect people to be a bit irritated and tell you to sod off, and they're like, no, that's perfect.
Yeah, accepting of it.
October's perfect. Yeah, and everybody's happy, aren't they?
Yeah, I love it. My daughter's unbelievably inquisitive and also smart as well.
Right.
Yeah, she said to me yesterday, and I still don't know the answer to this.
Right.
And if your parents are from Yorkshire, you may relate. So she comes in to me yesterday, she says, Papa, I've got you your apple. So she brings me an apple.
Yeah.
The first thing I do with this apple, just naturally, something like that. She goes, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So I'm rubbing it on my t-shirt. She, what are you doing that for?
Yeah.
So do you shine it?
Do you want to know the answer why?
She goes, what are you shining it for? And I didn't have an answer.
Do you want to know?
Go on.
So as an apple, obviously it ripens, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then once it's reached that stage of, this is my understanding, it then develops like this waxy coat to protect the outside of the apple from insects and the environment.
Right.
Because obviously it's like almost like preserving itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it can sometimes make the outside of an apple look almost cloudy or powdery. So we as instinctively have picked up, just because we're quite smart, intuitive creatures, that if we rub the outside of the apple, it removes the waxy coating and it tastes a bit more pleasant and looks a bit more pleasant. So there is reason to the madness of wiping an apple.
It's great that there is a reason, but that was never my reason, because I didn't know that.
No, you didn't.
But now I can tell her.
But intuitively, there's something like that. We do all kinds of things that we don't know.
It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, and we see it different. You maybe saw your dad do it, or your
I have got it off my dad and my mum. Yeah, they both do it.
So
they both do it,
and that's how it works, isn't it?
Yeah.
We do all kinds of weird and wonderful things that actually have a purpose that has been long since forgotten, which is why I think intuition is really important. I think it's to lean into intuition and use our senses and be in awe of nature, because that's like natural. That's what we should be doing. Yeah.
Love it, mate. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours.
Me too. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. So we're going to do your podcast next, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. So thanks for coming over. How can somebody attend your Leeds breakfast?
So the very best thing to do is to follow me on any of the major social media channels. So I'm pretty identifiable. We'll put them in the show notes, but like Paul Lanfear, there's not many Paul Lanfears about. If you find like a piano teacher, that's definitely not me. But I'm consistent across all the social media channels, and you just every couple of weeks you'll see me just mention the breakfast. They're online, they're on Zoom. Depending on when somebody is seeing the most important one of the year is always the first one, because that's January, and we call that the Discovery Day. That's online, and that's where we kind of look at the year ahead and we do some goal setting and stuff like that. So I encourage most people, I encourage everybody to come to that, even if they never want to come to another breakfast again. It's just come to that, because I have a little methodology that automatically kind of leaves people with a one-page business plan, and then you can pick and choose which other breakfasts you come to. Some of them are in person, where you get a lovely breakfast at Alton Hall. Some of them are online. I've started doing these really interesting ones where we do this kind of fireside chat where we have a speaker for an hour, but we really kind of get into it, and then we have like an off-the-record Q&A, which is not recorded and is very much off the record. Yeah. So there's a whole range of things, but if you follow me on social media, and obviously check out the podcast is really good. And if I can ever be of any service to anybody, they just send me a message. And if you're listening to the podcast and you've enjoyed it, and there's an aspect that you've enjoyed it, I love hearing that. I like hearing what people enjoy about the podcast that we do. So if they were to send me a message, I can tell you that would really brighten up my day. I'd really like to see those messages. It's nice to know what resonates with people, because then people like you and I can dig into those things that people want to hear about.
Love it.
Yeah.
Nice one. Thank you, mate.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks for sticking around till the end. All the social handles from both of us are below. I'll see you in the next one.